Foxing self-titled album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this latest album from St. Louis-based emo and indie rock outfit, Foxing. They've been at it for a few years now, and up until this point, I have to be real with y'all, I feel like I just have not been the biggest fan of the group's stuff. Their debut album, The Albatross, had a lot of classic nods to old school emo and just the early days of indie rock, and those moments were pretty nice. I certainly got it, and it was very, very emotional. However, some of the more chamber folk and more subdued moments of this album got very boring very quickly. And my fears on their debut were most certainly doubled when it came to their follow-up record. Dealer came out in 2015, and I was absolutely kind of floored by how very, very average this album was. I mean, there were certainly cuts here that were cool and emotional and took me back to a simpler time, but some of the more subtle moments here put me to sleep. With Nearer to God, I remained just as middle of the road, probably more middle of the road than ever. There were things about this album that I really loved, like the production and the harmonies. But the band was also trying to be more experimental, and it led to a lot of ugly moments. Even their last album, Draw Down the Moon, I mean, the highs were high, but man, the lows seemed lower than ever. I have been very up in the air as far as their sound goes. At least, at the times, though, I feel like their emotions, their harmonies are at least enough to carry me through a record, even though I've never really loved one. Now, leading up to this thing, a lot of people were pointing me in the direction of these singles, and they certainly caught me off guard and actually got me pretty excited for this record. They were raw and abrasive, and the band just sounded great, and holy hell, it's taken a few albums, but I feel like I'm getting it now. This album starts off with Secret History, and right off the bat, it is a very artsy and hard-to-place introduction. It's got a very stripped-down instrumental and some haunted vocals, very heartfelt. But there's also a lot of drama here. The horns in the distance add so much. And it does take off. The volume instantly goes from a 2 to a 12. Vocals are passionate. The guitars are triumphant. This track is really explosive. I mean, what even is this? Foxing sound like a whole new band on this record. And up to this point, I have been very critical of their music, especially the riskier side of it. But this album is risk after risk, and a lot of them pay off. Hell 99, ever since this track dropped as a single, I've been enamored with everything about it. 30 seconds in, and we have not heard anything even remotely like this from the band. It is a visceral, noisy cut that is fueled by emotion and pretty wild. It is very raw. It is very in your face. I didn't think they had a track like this in them. It is the exact opposite of everything that I thought we would hear here, and it is good. With Spit, this album continues to have so much going for it. I mean, honestly, I did enjoy the singles leading up to this thing quite a bit, but Foxing do a great job of keeping you around for the rest of this thing. This track is much more sleek, slow-paced, it's a little cautious sounding, and you don't really know where it's going, but it's very moody, very emotional. Maybe even a little evil sounding at parts, and it is so cool, as is Greyhound, one of this album's lead singles, and for very good reason. The dreamy aesthetic, the hazy atmosphere, the vocal performance, just how kaleidoscopic this track gets. It is a journey. Also, I want to give a special shout out to the production throughout this whole record, because the band sound amazing. They sound like a whole new artist. The guitar solos on this cut are super noisy, and let me tell you, this thing goes well over 8 minutes, and I'm glued the entire time. The way that this track builds, by God, all building to this ambient and experimental portion, which even that comes off pretty damn cool. Everything about this track is impressive, as is the track Cleaning. The band here on this album do a really great job of keeping you on your toes, because you really don't know what you're going to hear from one track to the next. This is a much more busy and electronic leaning cut, but it's actually pretty exciting. It's dreary, it's dreamy, and once again, it is very emotional. I mean, the band's music has always run on emotion, but amongst this atmosphere that they've built for themselves on this album, it is coming through clearer than ever. It's full of production tricks and sound play. If you are into the weirder and artsier side of rock right now, this is a feast. And I absolutely adore Barking. This is easily one of my favorite deep cuts here. It's breezy, it's carefree, it almost has that heartland rock style of their early recordings, but it sounds a whole lot better here. It's full of heart, it's dripping with passion. I have no idea what led them to create this album, but I'm glad that they did. And if you've been enjoying this album's artsy tendencies, don't worry, they stick around through this entire record. Also really love Kentucky McDonald's. This one has a lot of nods to their early work. If you were a fan of their early work, work. There's a lot of elements to it here. This track is a little bit more organic and a little bit more subtle as well. But there's also a lot of drama here. The build up to this explosion of a hook is really impressive. And when it finally does arrive, Foxing have never sounded so monolithic. The noisy guitars, the pounding drums, the screamed portion at the end, give me more of this. Yeah, I may be a few years late and I don't know where this album came from, but I am absolutely adoring everything that Foxing are trying out here. Real shame though, they do kind of whiff the ending, and that kind of just makes me sad. Like Hall of Frozen Heads, for example, easily my least favorite track here, by far. Now, it is one of the most old school emo sounding cuts here, which is a sound that I like from the band. But for my money, this is a track that really doesn't work out, and certainly a risk that doesn't pan out the way that they thought so, at least. More than anything, I don't know what this track wants to be. Does it want to be that old school, heartfelt, indie emo hybrid of the early 2000s, or does it want to be a modern art rock track? It's not really going in one way or another, and neither one sounded particularly interesting. And the vocals that we get here, easily my least favorite of the bunch. I think it's the worst track here. And Crybaby as a finale, it's very okay. The band's heart is in the right place, the emotion is here, but this just seems really tame. It just reminds me of an okay track from their last few records. It's not living up to the big sound of this album. However, the rest of this record is nothing short of really exciting. Looks Like Nothing is one of the most subtle tracks here. It's a hushed intro that just kind of creeps along, and we get a great dose of those big old harmonies. And yeah, it's passionate as hell. It is heartfelt. And not only is it a very compelling, slow-burning, hushed tune, it's one that's pretty busy if you look at the little details. And when the rest of the instrumentals eventually pop their way in, it leads to some of the most psychedelic and kaleidoscopic and thrilling moments of this record. Gratitude continues to keep me on your toes. Once again, this thing picks it up. It's a little synth-driven. There's some urgency here. Fans of the Hell 99 single would want to check this out. It's simply put, some of the most heartfelt and raw rock music in any genre that I've heard this year. Also, really love Dead Cat. It's the shortest track here by far, barely 2 minutes, but it's also got some of the freakiest and most experimental ideas of this entire album. And I love the production here and the way that we get these vocals soaring over this hazy atmosphere. Oh, it's so cool. And Dead Internet, late in the album, is one of the freakiest and weirdest cuts here. The instrumental starts out as very abrasive and cold, and eventually it does open up, and when it does, it's beautiful, it's colorful. It's one that you have to open up your old brain for, but it's certainly worth it. I don't know where this record came from because I've just been so lukewarm on the Foxing sound seemingly forever, but this is their grand vision, I feel like. This is what they've been working towards, and it sounds great. Their ideas are genuinely progressive here, genuinely out there, and without really getting too far away from their very emotional, very heartfelt beginnings. This is exactly what I've wanted to hear from the band, and in the future I hope we get more of this, because right now I'm feeling a very strong 8 on this album. But let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.